Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we delve into the issue of conscious clairvoyant engagement with the extraterrestrial beings and intelligences that are here on planet Earth and have been making their presence felt with real power and efficacy for the last 80 years since the end of the Second World War. I'm mindful that today is Good Friday. That is the day when the Christian religion commemorates the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth some 2,000 years ago, an event when combined with the resurrection 3 days later, formed the catalyst and impulse for the emergence of the Christian religion. I want to reflect on crucifixion today. You know, the symbol of Christianity is a man hanging on a cross with nails driven through both hands and his feet until he dies ultimately of asphyxiation and extraordinary pain. So the image, the fact of crucifixion is indelibly linked with the Christian religion, and in many ways forms the iconic symbol of Western civilization itself, given the dominance of the Christian religion in Western civilization. And I want to just reflect for just a few minutes on the nature of crucifixion in relationship to what we're seeing in terms of the genocide taking place in Palestine. There was a pediatrician in the news over the last several days, a Dr. Haj Hassan, who had been working in the hospitals there in Gaza, trying to tend to the babies and the young people that were dying of blast wounds, but also of starvation and malnutrition. And she made a comment that what we are witnessing in Gaza is the worst that humanity is capable of. And I think that insight into what is going on against the Palestinians is what links what is happening to the crucifixion. When one thinks of crucifixion, one thinks of unspeakable violence and evil against a person or a group who is completely innocent and deserves nothing of the kind. So I think the first point that I would make about crucifixion is that it's a violation of the innocent with unspeakable evil. It was said of Jesus of Nazareth that he was a man without guile. He was pure of heart. He only sought the good. So when he was crucified, those witnessing that event knew that an unspeakable crime was being committed. The second point I want to make about crucifixion, which pertains to what happened with Jesus, and pertains to what's happening now with the Palestinians, is at the heart of the unspeakable crime is fundamentalism. And in that sense, what happened to Jesus was not unique to Jesus. What's happening in terms of the genocide against the Palestinian is not unique to the Palestinians. We've seen many genocides, obviously the most horrendous of which was the Holocaust that was transacted against the Jewish people by the Nazis in the 1930s and 1940s. And what makes what's happening now in Palestine, therefore, even more horrific is a people that experience a Holocaust would, within the same generation, do the same thing to another people, is part of what makes what's happening in Palestine so excruciating in a way that really challenges who we think we are as human beings, as civilized human beings. Can we continue to consider ourselves civilized when we are still capable of genocide? Fundamentalism is that mentality that is so certain of its possession of truth that it's willing to ostracize and persecute and even kill anyone who disagrees. 2,000 years ago, the fundamentalism that gripped the Jewish elders at that time was the fundamentalism that they knew God's will and that it was an unforgivable sin for anyone to claim to be a Messiah, to claim to be a son of God. That fundamentalism brought into play the crucifixion of an innocent man who was so aligned with the Spirit, so aligned with the numinous, the holy, that he radiated alignment and spoke from that place. But the fundamentalists could not countenance that elevation of spirit, that purity of being, that embodiment of the holy. And so they conspired with the Romans to kill Jesus. It's interesting to note that one of the first terms that was used to describe who Jesus was, even before he was crucified, he was called Emmanuel, God with us. There was something so radiantly numinous about who he was and how he presenced himself that the people observing and experiencing his presence said, this is God with us. That's what Emmanuel means. It means God with us. You know, one thinks of Mother Teresa, who I had the great privilege to meet on several occasions, and you felt the presence of God. Such was the purity of her heart. Such was the innocence of her being and the selflessness with which she served the most desolate of humanity. There's a third characteristic of crucifixion, and that is Pontius Pilate. Fundamentalism engages in unspeakable crimes when the authorities, when the people in power do nothing. Pontius Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent. He said so. And yet, politically motivated by the forces of his day, he allowed the crucifixion to take place, and then he washed his hands, as if washing his hands absolved him of the crime in which he was a perpetrator. Who is Pontius Pilate today? Joe Biden is the Pontius Pilate of today. Wringing his hands, saying, well, we don't know what to do. We're trying to get Benjamin Netanyahu to lighten up, but we're not going to do anything to actually stop him. We're going to keep giving him all the weapons that he needs. We're going to keep giving him all the political support that is required to allow the genocide to continue. But wringing his hands, we know that he knows that the Palestinians are innocent. We know that he knows that genocide is being conducted. We know that he knows that with a single phone call, he could stop the carnage. But he is not, and he will not. And he will go down in history as an accomplice to genocide. So when one brings these aspects together, the complete innocence of Jesus and the Palestinians, the fundamentalism that has gripped the Israeli psyche. This is our land. We can ethnically cleanse anybody who's not Jewish by any means necessary. The Pontius Pilate, who has the power, but doesn't exercise it because of the fecklessness of his morality. When all these things come together, genocide becomes inevitable. So today on Good Friday, as the world takes in Good Friday and the crucifixion of an innocent man 2,000 years ago, let us just feel the pathos, the compassion, as we bear witness, like the three Marys standing at the foot of the cross. We bear witness to the children and the innocent in Palestine who are being slaughtered on the anvil of a cross. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for just bearing witness with me today. It's hard to bear. It's hard to look at it in the eye. We want to now turn to our subject for today as we continue to deepen our awareness of the complexities and the challenges that are associating themselves with this extraordinary moment in which humanity finds itself as the awareness that extraterrestrial beings and intelligences and civilizations have been frequenting our planet, observing human behavior, making their presence felt in increasingly powerful, but yet so far subtle ways. We know from everything that we've gathered about these beings is that they're technically advanced, they're psychically advanced, and they communicate with each other and with the human beings that have reported communication through mental telepathy, through clairvoyance. And that's what is enabling us humans, primitive as we are, to communicate with them. So today we have the pleasure of welcoming Michelle DesPres, who is a professional licensed, certified clairvoyant who works with people in a therapeutic way and has done for many, many years, who has had her own ET experiences. And we have recently got acquainted. She's participating in our extraterrestrial studies program. And I have had the pleasure of meeting her. And as soon as I found out exactly what she was doing, I invited her to come on to Humanity Rising. You'll remember that Asher Lyman last Monday came on, and he also is clairvoyant and has developed meditative techniques and was so popular with our after chat that he's working with Shannon and Stan to start regular meetings where we can start meditating in an intentional way to communicate with the ETs. And those of you who are interested, please be in touch with Shannon in the after chat. So I want to welcome Michelle to open up her video and take herself off mute. Michelle will make a few opening comments about a little bit more about her background and clairvoyance and her contact with the extraterrestrials. And then I'll circle back and we will have a dialogue for the balance of the time. And then she will join the after chat today, so there will be plenty of opportunity for a deeper dialogue. So Michelle, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful message too. It's really, and we'll talk about this today. I don't really think change is going to come through politicians. It's going to come through us as individuals, the people, we the people. So, maybe if we start really getting united in those efforts, this aspect of genocide we can make that a thing of the past, right? But thank you, Georg. Thank you, Stan, also for getting me up to speed and getting me in here. It's really a pleasure to get to be here. I found Ubiquity, through very synchronistic serendipity coincidences that I think coincidence is really ill-defined. Those types of things led me here. And it's a pleasure to get to be here. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into this work. So I have been a clairvoyant medium now for, close to the last 20 years. I went through the Berkeley Psychic program, which was a certified clairvoyant program. And when I found it, realized there was nothing else I could do. I had been doing a lot of corporate work and things like that. And it was that was sucking the soul out of me, quite honestly. But what I also realized is that as a young girl, I had a lot of experiences that I just didn't know were psychic experiences, were experiences with ETs, that really in the long run led me into this greater path. So, as a young girl, I did not come from a communicative family. I come from a dysfunctional family, quite honestly. And so there wasn't a lot of people I could dialogue with. And as a really young, 3, 4, and 5-year-old, I would talk to the Indian in the mountains and the Indians in the clouds and the different energies that would be around me at any given time, not knowing exactly what that was. And then one day, as I'm a little older, I'm walking to school with a bunch of girlfriends and I'm explaining a dream I had had. And my dreams are always, I get a lot of my own information in my dreams. And I'm explaining this dream to these girls. And one of these girls just stopped and she looked at me and she said, "You're weird." And that was it. I shut it down. It's when I stopped paying attention to those things. And I certainly wasn't going to be telling anybody else anymore what I was getting. Unfortunately, that really spun my life into a downfall. I was not listening to my intuition anymore. I was not following where my guides were trying to help me to get to be. And my life took some really deep turns. I don't want to say dark, although I was a really young mom. I think that was really a saving grace for me in the long run. But it really wasn't until I was about 33 when it came back again. And so I had my children by that time. I was long into my marriage, and my marriage was failing. I was also very unhappy in my career. We owned a flooring business, a coffee shop. I also worked in the publishing business. I worked in the oil and gas industry. Whew. And I just felt like nothing was right for me in my life. And I remember sitting in my office, my home office, and I was in tears. I knew my marriage was failing. I knew that I didn't know what I was going to be doing, but something had to change on a drastic level. All of a sudden, out of the blue, I hear this voice, a woman, say to me, "Fret not, everything will be okay." And I spun around, really expecting to see somebody standing in my office. It was so clear. And when I realized nobody was there, I realized it wasn't the first time I'd heard her voice. And it was so comforting. And it just gave me such a sense of hope that I realized, until I understood what that was about, why was I hearing that? Why did I often know things that other people didn't know? I knew nothing in my life was going to be right. And so I just started researching and looking for, what are these psychic abilities? I got myself some tarot. I went to psychic fairs, and it's through the psychic fairs I got connected with a school in Denver. I'm in Colorado, that is based on the Berkeley Psychic Institute program, which is a Louis Bostwick program, if anybody's familiar with that. And it was all about clairvoyance. And I really was so excited to learn. I thought, oh, great, I'll be able to get rid of my tarot cards and read for people without them. And I get into this school and realize this has nothing to do with reading for other people. It has everything to do with my own self-healing. And let me tell you, that was revolutionary. It changed my entire life for the better. I can't even tell you. If I hadn't found that, what would have happened? I don't know. I would be really unhealthy, probably really unhappy, and my health would probably be in dire straits. But finding this clairvoyant program and learning how to look at my own energy, my own programming, my karma, how to retool it, how to reprogram myself, take control over my own reality, understand how consciousness works. That was pivotal and a great turning point for me. And it's also when I let go of all my other businesses and I strictly went to being a clairvoyant, trying to help others. One of the things I realized about this work was that it's more of a therapy than a novelty. The idea of going to a psychic and paying $800 just for one session makes no sense to me. It makes more sense that we help people as a therapy, like a therapist does. Get them, here's what you need to be working right now, or here's what you want to maybe be considering. And then giving them the opportunity in a financial way to come back and continue, keep working it. And so I really devised I wrote the ethical standards for intuitives because I really believe that this is the therapy that's missing in our culture. And, really just started to understand that if we, can get people working it on a consistent basis, they can work through their things pretty easily. And I've absolutely seen that. As a matter of fact, one of my first clients was on several different antidepressants and different medicines, and she was suicidal a lot of the time. And when we got her connected to the idea that maybe what she's hearing are negative energies, maybe how to hear better energies, how to just find her own knowledge, it took her maybe 3 years, and she was off all of her meds. And she's still one of my, she's like a second mother to me these days. And we have just a wonderful relationship. But it really helped her to find that healing she needed. And consequently, it's been a lot of different scenarios like that over the years. But one of the things that I have come to realize in this work, what I used to think of as guides, I now think of as ETs. I still, I don't necessarily preface it as ETs all the time, although that's changing, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. I still say guides for me, but guides I never quite associated as extraterrestrials or extra dimensionals or, higher consciousnesses. I just figured they were a system that was here to help us. Now, over time, as I've learned more and I've had my own experiences, more and more of my own experiences, I'm realizing guides are ETs. And over the years, that those messages and who I've learned who they are specifically has really changed how I approach this work now. And I'll share with you a little bit later what I'm getting from the ETs. But I think what we should do is, first of all, just talk about how extraterrestrials communicate with us. We've seen accounts of this. Well, like Jim was talking about this morning, Jesus has had his own aspect of communication with higher energy. We might want to call those extraterrestrials, right? Noah had the angels come to him. I used to always say, angels help me. Now I say ETs. I recognize that they're just an extraterrestrial being. And same with, somebody like a Joseph Smith. Getting an angel that, tells him things, and then he enacts a religion around this. There's been a lot throughout our history, right? From the beginning of our being, really, there have been these others that have communicated with us, helped us. Our indigenous people talk about that, their star ancestors. And even more recently, we get, of course, all of our contactees and abductees who are talking about the extraterrestrials and what their agendas are and different things like that. But there's one underlying theme within this idea of the extraterrestrials, and it's how they communicate with us. So it's all telepathic. If we listen to any of the contactees, abductees, it all comes through a form of telepathy, or physical, right? When you talk about people like Noah, the angel came to him, or that's the accounting that we get, right? We don't know if the angel really came and spoke to him, or if that was a telepathic communication, but it happens on a different level there. And we're going to talk about how we can increase that and how we can have more communication there, and just why we want to, what's the purpose. To date, we have been subject to them communicating with us for the most part. Certainly we have channels, and we can channel information, and we can go seek information from the extraterrestrials. But for the most part, it's been them coming to us and giving us information. We can change that. We can become more proactive in that. And I remember when I first was really getting into the clairvoyant idea, I say clairvoyant because that's the school that I went to, but I'm more clairaudient. I hear frequencies. I hear words and sounds. I always heard words and sounds as a kid. First of all, I'm dyslexic. and reading. I was a slow reader, and me and math just do not get along. But I would hear words in my head and I would have to go look them up in the dictionary to see what they were. I was always being fed information. And honestly, it was wonderful. And at one point, when I just started with this work, I remember hearing kind of this whoop, 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 whoop sound. And I would hear it and I'd be like, what is that? And then I was signed. If anybody knows who Tom Kenyon is, he's a channel. He channels the Hathors. Every time I would hear that whooping sound, next thing I know, in my inbox, there would be a channel from Tom Kenyon. And I started to realize when I'm hearing that whooping, I would hear it and I'd be like, oh, Tom Kenyon's getting a channel. And I'd wait to see what it was. It was really kind of amazing to start to understand how it was really expanding and really more of a global consciousness, kind of a bigger element there that was going on. And it prompted me to start connecting more to ET type of entities, simply because, the Hathors, or an Egyptian group, and who, in my understanding, were really an ET group that either were lending their consciousness here or maybe even physically being here, different things like that. But it really started to lead me down that road. And what I have first discovered as I started kind of delving into it, and I should preface this too, I don't necessarily like to look at other people's information, in the sense of I don't like to read what other channels are doing necessarily. I'm not, real well versed in that, because I like to get information for myself. I like to keep it clean. I like to keep it just sort of like that. I don't want my monkey mind interfering in what I get intuitively. That's a little different for me now today, because I'm really entrenched in my intuitive space and I know what is me and what is not me. And I know how to discern what I want to believe and what I don't believe. And I think that everybody gets the right to do that on their own terms. But what I realized when I first started doing this is that ETs were contacting us for just a few, a host of reasons. They were either contacting us for spiritual evolution, to help us come into who are we as spirits, on a higher consciousness level, how to raise our hearts, that type of thing. I also learned that they were coming through with a lot of environmental concerns. The Hathors particularly were always talking about what was going to be happening on the planet. And is it the Zimbabwe school, the kids in, I think it was Zimbabwe, where they had the craft land, and those little kids, elementary students, are getting telepathic messages from these beings that they saw. And it was about the idea that we are destroying our planet. And, I often have wondered about that specific scenario at times, and how, why those kids? And I would love to know what those kids have done now into their lives as far as helping with the planet. I am sure that I'm sure we've all seen the Netflix Close Encounters that's new out there, or maybe it's just Encounters. And they talk to those kids, but they don't necessarily go into what those kids are doing about what that information was. But I can only imagine that it never left them. They say that it never left them. Those messages are indelibly, ingrained into them. But you have to imagine that it's had an impact on how they go about their lives and how they treat the earth and one another. But they also come to us like the George Adamski idea, right? Our space brothers were brothers and sisters, and peace and harmony, and how to learn how to love each other. This idea that we're really all part of the same family. And if we can hold love in our hearts for one another, that's going to also help us advance ourselves. And then, of course, we get ETs that come in for the technological advancements. And I think that's happened, well, if you look all the way back through antiquity, Prometheus gave us fire. That's a technology. That just follows along throughout our history, right? We're getting new ideas and advancing ourselves through different ways of doing that. Tesla, right, always used intuition. Einstein used intuition to come up with what he devised. Even Steve Jobs, we wouldn't have that phone if Steve Jobs did not meditate and visualize it. And he even said that those things would come to him through other means, intuitive means. And of course, you've got Srinivasa Ramanujan, the Indian mathematician, who attributes his 3,900 formulas to goddess Mahalakshmi. Well, who is goddess Mahalakshmi, right? She is an ET. These are these other consciousness, other beings that are trying to help us to progress ourselves. We also get the idea from ETs about warnings and prophecies. A lot of times people come in with this concept that they're warning us about catastrophic events. That's part of their communication with us. They also come in and talk to us about how we are a part of the galactic community. And, a lot of contactees talk about this in channels, about how we are a part of a bigger community. And those are some of the more positive reasons that we get messages from them. We also have some negative things that we get from them. And I don't think we should gloss over that. I think we should recognize that. Some of the negative communications that people have gotten with ETs is, are they here to do away with humanity? Or, we get that idea. Are we a zoo, a farm, a laboratory? What do they really want with us? Are they trying to enslave us? There are these also negative ideals that ETs can come in with as well. But what I think that I'd like to focus on is it doesn't really matter what their agenda is, because when we become conscious and independent in that way, sovereign beings, understanding the bigger picture of ourselves as energy beings and how we can collapse waves into reality, then it doesn't matter what the ETs are doing, because all of a sudden we've stepped into the arena and we now have a say in the game. And so no matter why they're coming in, it's really up to us to get up to speed, to match them so that we're not manipulated, so that we can hold sovereignty, so that we can be creators of our own destiny, right? And so, if we are being looked at from the zoo perspective, the farm perspective, the laboratory, we can put an end to any of that. We can also work more toward some of those positive ideals, how to become the galactic community. This is the messages I get mostly from my ET groups. It's really about our spiritual evolution. It's about peace and harmony, and it's about becoming a part of the greater community, especially now as we are becoming spacefaring people. We are very much in alignment these days with the concept of going out and maybe even doing on other planets what's been done to us. We are going to become the ETs, and we could very well go to other planets and make them our zoo, our farm, our laboratory, right? And I think we have to really start taking a check-in with ourselves and making sure that we understand just what we're doing. And the only way we're going to get there, in my opinion, the only way that we're going to get there, and the only way that I've seen it through my own clairvoyant impressions, is by becoming conscious, is by developing that intuitive skill and learning how it works, engaging with it to create the reality that we really want. And the thing that I've always found is when we become conscious, it's really hard not to love. I get that there are higher energies, higher consciousnesses that we might want to call the reptilians, or any of the negative grays, the mantis, some of the, I guess, what we might perceive as more of the negative energies. Certainly they have a higher consciousness. But in my experience, most of those groups who come into higher consciousness come in with a fully intact sense of love, sense of we're all connected, we're all one, we're really parts of the same thing. And when you understand like that, you don't harm, because you realize if you're harming somebody else, you're harming yourself. And so it typically takes care of that. It typically brings that level of peace. So, let's talk now about intuition and consciousness. I have come across many people who say this to me. Oh, what a gift that is you have. Oh, I wish I had that gift. Oh, you're special. You have this gift. I don't see it like that. First of all, it's not always a gift. Not when you're seeing catastrophe or you're recognizing, oh my gosh, grandma's probably going to die tomorrow. That's not really a gift. That can be a little traumatic. But it's also not reserved for a small population of people. Every single person is intuitive. Every single person's clairvoyant. That is not a skill that is refined to one type of person. Yes, maybe some of us are a little more tapped in because it's just our soul's time to help move that evolution along. But today, we can all be intuitive. And that is really where we need to be focusing in order to start enacting new ideas. I think it's Einstein that said, the mind cannot perceive anything new. It can only rattle around what it's known. It is intuition, it's consciousness, it's the field that brings something new to the mind in order to find something, a new solution. So if we're just using our same old thinking to figure out how to put an end to politics like we have today, we won't get there because we can't, because nothing new is going to be introduced. It's the same old thing. It's only when we can get still and allow from nothing something to come that we will get new ideas. So the first thing we have to get over, the first hurdle we have to get over, is the idea that only a select few people are intuitive and have a gift. We all have been given that gift. And I personally think that this is why ETs are so interested in us. We have a soul that is, I guess, somehow bigger, deeper. It's in how it works within a body. And it has this intuitive component, the consciousness really set into it. And I think they recognize that. There's been a lot of accounts, if going back to like we were talking about Noah, maybe the ETs at one point wanted to do away with humanity and what was created here. It just didn't happen. It just, because we are survivors, we're stronger than that. We listen, we have intuition, we know that we can follow a different path. I think in the long run, they weren't able to do away with us, with their experiment, perhaps. And now we've been left to our own devices, which is scary in some ways. But I also like to see things as the cycle of time. All of this happens because it is the cycle of time. You can't go from, you have to evolve, right? Souls are constantly evolving. We come through, we reincarnate because we're evolving as a soul. And really the only place you get experience is when you take in density, when you're in a body. That is where you really grow and learn. So, this, as we're becoming spacefaring people, we're going to need to really understand this idea that intuition is the universal language. I have often heard that math is the universal language, and I hope it isn't, because it's a language I'll never learn. I have already come to that conclusion. To me, it's consciousness, it's intuition. That is the language of the universe. The math, I think, is something for a rational mind. It's so that the rational mind can wrap its head around something or realize that something more is going on beyond what it might know. But it's really consciousness that serves, and telepathy and things like that we hear of, that is the universal language. And like I said, we all have these abilities. And so it doesn't matter. We have a lot of different labels for what an intuitive is. You can call yourself a clairvoyant, an empath, a psychic, a witch, a healer, a medium, a channel. It all works with the same capacity, which is that intuitive, conscious capacity. And so we're all really using that same thing. And, you know, I personally think that before we are anything, we're intuitive. We're born intuitive. We know to cry when we need food. You know, we know to ask for help when we're little. It's just instinctual how we operate like that. And so it's something that, you know, we have very early. We have a lot of accounts of young kids. As a matter of fact, my middle son, I have 3 boys, my middle son, when he was 2, used to always talk about he used to talk about war. That's all he ever talked about. He would draw pictures of war and dying and death and destruction. And he was going to be a Marine. That's all he ever wanted to be a Marine. And of course, his father and I were like, well, you have so many other options. You do not have to choose that in your life. But as I started to come into this work, and he was a little older when I came into this work, I realized he has always been looking at past lives for himself. Interestingly, he did become a Marine. And before he left, I made him take with him Archangel Michael, the warrior angel. It's like, keep him safe, keep him protected. I always did all of my work to keep him protected. And one day, I'm driving and I have a vision of my son in an explosion, and I see a devastating event for him. He was in Afghanistan. He was deployed out to Afghanistan in, don't make me think of the time. 2010, 20 something there. And I was super worried about him. And I remember saying to myself, when I had this vision of him in an explosion, I said to myself, you're just being a paranoid mom. You're just worrying, you're lowering your vibration. And I had been listening to this song, a new CD I had gotten for Christmas. And I'd been listening to it in the car. And I was like, whatever this song is, it's just really poetic. It's making you think about him. And I pick up the CD and I was like, what's the name of this song? And the name was Arlington. And that's it. My heart dropped. It makes me cry still to this day. I knew it was going to happen. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I got the phone call that he had been in this explosion. And when I saw the vision, I quickly, like while I'm driving, I wrapped him in a bubble and put protection around him, asked Archangel Michael to look after him. I opened up his field, gave him lots of room. I pulled everybody out of his space. I did not want other people in there dictating what this was going to be for him. I wanted it to be whatever his soul needed it to be, honestly. And, did that and just, kept my fingers crossed that nothing was going to happen. And then when I got the call, I learned that he really was in the best of a worst case scenario. Only 40% of the explosive went off. And he had no other wounds. It shattered his ankle and they weren't able to repair it. So they did have to do a below the knee amputation. And he has his prosthesis now. But he had no head injuries, no back injuries. There was no really any other issues that were going on for him. And when I finally got to see him, he said to me that he had been, it was around Christmas time, and they had gotten cards from a lot of people from just different people all over sending the service people cards. And Sam had gotten this card with Archangel Michael on it. And he said that he tore Michael off the card and he kept it in his pocket everywhere he went. And the day that this explosion happened, he had done his laundry and he couldn't find Michael. And he said to me, I knew something bad was going to happen. Sure enough, it did. But Sam was always intuitive like that. When I was in the hospital with him, I noticed that he was having these dreams like he used to have as a kid with this entity that was around him. And he said to me, this entity is why I've done everything that I've done. It's always led me astray. It keeps me in this war pattern, all of this. And so I sat there with him and we worked on, get that out. Let's get that in control. Let's understand what it is. And let's give you a different future. And, looking at this with him, I said to him, you've always been a soldier. This is what your soul has done. And it's time for change. This is why you don't get to go back to being a Marine, thank God. And he said to me, my biggest fear is not going off and dying. It is being a civilian. And I said to him, well, that is where your growth is in being a civilian and learning that you can be a part of the fold. You don't just have to go. And so, helping him through that was very critical for him. And I'm really happy to say he's made such an incredible transition into becoming a civilian. And that's now 11 years down the road for him. And he's still very much in the habit of paying attention to what happens in his dreams and his thoughts, with the energies around him. But, teaching him how to look at that and how to get control over it was the difference. So I really think that, intuitives used to be, they used to help decide all matters of life. There's a really great podcast, and I can put a link in our chat at some point with this podcast. It's called The Emerald Podcast. And the episode I'm talking about is, I think it's intuitives. I think it's for the intuitives. And it is a wonderful history of how the intuitive, the shaman, the seers, those individuals were who everybody consulted, whether it was planting crops, where to build the city, what policies to enact within a civilization. They went to their shaman, they went to their intuitives for that. And then at some point in our history, that starts to get taken away from us for the reasons that, because when you're coming from the intuitive perspective, it looks at the greater good of all. And, in our history, we needed the downfall. It's not about the greater good of all. You have to have polarities. We live on a planet of polarities. So you have to have the negative lower pole, and then you can have the higher pole, and then you can find your balance in between those things. So I really like to see all of it really as just cycle of time. I don't want to demonize things that have happened because I think they're all necessary for soul growth. But we are at this point now where we can come back, where we can take back the take away the stigma of intuitives and psychics and these kinds of things, because we need that part of ourselves again. And we're seeing many more people who are really intact with these tools, especially our younger people. They don't really even question their own intuition. They just get it. But we're all coming back into that, which I'm really happy to say is happening. And for me, those skills happen in really 4 ways. We are clairvoyant. We can see energy and information. We're clairaudient. We can hear energy, frequency, vibration, and interpret it. We're clairsentient. We feel. I think a lot of times the clairsentients are what we call the empaths, who honestly, I think, have it the hardest. I think feeling is a difficult thing if you don't know what to do with it and how to have boundaries and parameters for it. It can really run your life. And then we're claircognizant. It's just that ability to just know something. We've all had those experiences. I don't think there's anybody I've ever met that says they haven't. They just didn't know that that's what was happening, perhaps. But the point here is that those are our ways of communicating consciously. We do that through our clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, claircognizance. And all of those abilities can be developed. They should be developed. For me, particularly, clairsentience, the feeling part of things. Like I said, I didn't come from a family that was real huggy, lovey, touchy, not at all. And I was not in the habit of expressing my feelings. I tend to think I still only have like one. But at one point in my spiritual development, I got the message, if you really, so I had been divorced for 15 years before I was ready to go back into relationship again, and really wanted to see if now, with an understanding of who I am, really set in who I am, can I make a marriage work? I wanted that, but I did not know how to go about having it. And I kept getting messages from my guides, my ETs, that I needed to open up that heart space and feel more. And so I would just walk around, at the grocery store, and I'd stand in front of an aisle and go, well, what do I feel like I want? And I would just let myself get pulled to whatever was best for me. And I started to express more about my emotions and things like that. And it really opened up that clairsentient aspect of me. And then I met my wonderful husband, and really helped me to establish that. And interestingly, he's very clairsentient. Emotion is his first sense. And, consequently, he has helped me to be able to articulate more of my own emotions. I do think that we're stronger with love. I've heard this in my life. I didn't always believe it. I really thought, no, I'm better alone. But I finally caved to the idea we're stronger with love. And I really believe that now. It's made me a much more well-rounded person. I think each of those 4 skills makes us a well-rounded person. I write about that in my book, how those what we call the clairs are what we can develop in order to change our healthcare systems, change our political systems, change our economic structures, change our, all of our systems. Those clairs go along with how to evolve ourselves. And I think we have to be evolving those if we really want to move forward as a species. But I've also noticed this. When we start to develop our abilities, there are at times energies that do not want us to do that. So I grew up in a household with a really dark entity in our home, and it terrified me as a girl. It lurked in every dark space. It lurked in my dreams. It would come in and really just terrorize me. I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. I'd be in a state of nervousness for days. It wasn't, and even when I left home, and I left home early, but even when I left home, this thing would still come in my dreams. I would feel it in my home, just different things like this. It wasn't until I really got entrenched in my intuition, and I was doing this as a work. And one night, that entity came, and I remember the dream, right? In the dream, I'd gotten a call from my mother, and she'd said that this entity was at her house, and she, wanted me to come and take care of it. And in the dream, I actually, in reality, I lived an hour away from her. So in the dream, though, I grabbed a bunch of my clairvoyant girlfriends and guy friends, and we went to my mother's house. And in this dream, I remember my mother saying, "Oh, the entity's over here." And I said, "No, it's in my room." And I went into what was my old girlhood room. And I went in my room, and I'm standing up against what was my dresser, from my girlhood. And all of a sudden, I don't see the entity, but all of a sudden the dresser gets propelled on top of me. And I'm starting to get really afraid. I feel this terror. I was like, oh no, it's this thing again. I'm like half awake, half asleep, right? Lucid in that sense. And I just shoved the dresser off of me. And the minute I did that, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is nothing. I can overcome this. I realized I had all the power. And I started doing by the power of Christ, I compel you to leave. And let me tell you, I did not grow up Catholic. I grew up Baptist, but not Catholic. But the prayer just started coming back to me. And in the middle of this dream, as I'm saying it, I'm feeling myself being risen up into the air by this entity, like it's trying to scare me. But I keep up with the prayer, by the power of Christ, I compel you to leave. And next thing I know, I start to come back down really gently. And then I see this dark ball of energy, and it just starts to become really small. And it just becomes this pinpoint of darkness. And I come back down and I realize, oh, I have it. It's not a problem anymore. And I woke up immediately and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm good. And I wasn't afraid. And I went right back to sleep. That never happened for me. These things would plague me for days. I went right back to sleep. I woke up in the morning, wasn't even thinking about it. And I walk to the end of my bed and I see this butterfly down on the floor in front of my bed. And I had these butterflies up on my dresser. And the dream came back to me and I realized my room was set up like my girlhood room. And I had these butterflies up on my dresser and one was down at the foot of my bed. And it came right back to me and I was like, oh, that entity was here last night. And I immediately called my mother and I said, hey, I had a dream last night about that entity. And she said, oh, I thought I saw something the other day. And I said to her, it'll never bother me again. It will never plague me like that again. But that entity is yours, Mom. It's what you create as darkness. And I realized in that moment that energy that had been trying to stop me all my life was really her fear of intuition. She doesn't subscribe to what I do. She thinks I don't know what she thinks it is, but she doesn't think I should be doing that. She also doesn't realize that she does now because I told her. That energy was your fear, what you created as a monster to keep my sister and I out of that space. It worked with my sister. My sister never got out of that fear. And honestly, it spun her into drug addiction, mental health issues. She's bipolar schizophrenic. So my mother is bipolar also. And my mother had her own instances as a child with these types of things too. So I think it was imposed on her. She imposed it on us, but I took the power back. And I've come to realize that a lot of times those dark energies, what we might call demons, things like that, are really they're either trying to keep us out of our power or they're showing us that if we can defeat them, we can come into our power. And that's how I like to see it. As a matter of fact, more recently, I was binge watching Skinwalker Ranch, I think seasons 2 or 3 or something of that nature, and had been watching several of them. And then I had gone to bed and I'm thinking about it. And next thing I know, in my dreams, I'm at Skinwalker Ranch. I'm at Homestead 2. All of a sudden I feel this entity, right? It's right there. It's in my face, just this looming, the same type of thing, only slightly different than the entity I grew up with. And I feel it and I wake myself back up, right? And I was like, oh. And then I go back to bed. I'm at Homestead 2 again, and the entity's there. I wake back up again and I can feel it in my room. And I was like, oh, Michelle, you're projecting yourself there and it sees you. Whatever that entity is there, and it's big, it sees you. And I just rolled over and I said, Archangel Michael, get that thing out of here. Keep me safe. Just put some, I always wrap myself in white light. I think I have the power. I don't know that I need Archangel Michael, but it's very calming and very helpful. And so I called on him and that was it. And I just told him, and I pulled all my energy back. And I was like, that's not a place for you. And you don't want that thing seeing you anymore. And so I pulled my energy back and that was it. Didn't happen again. So we have a lot of control over those things when we can be in our intuitive faculty, really, really in there. But one of the other things that our intuition is really meant to help us with, and I think this is part of this evolution, is how to become whole people. We can learn how to deprogram ourselves, right? Through different, we all have karma. It's the big reason we keep incarnating here. To me, karma is a self-imposed thing. It's something that if you want to feel like you have done something bad in a lifetime, then you're going to hold karma against yourself. And then you're going to come in and either let somebody else do that bad to you to make up for the karma and different things like that. But really, when you can use intuition to find out where you're programmed, or what, what Danny Sheehan said this yesterday about astrology. When you look at your astrology, you see where your programming is, what you have to work through if you don't want to be deprogrammed like that. And it's your intuitive faculties that allow you to do that. And it's that deprogramming that actually gives us our free will. So, well, in fact, if anybody's ever read the book Fractal Time, which is I'm losing his name, but fractal time is a really great understanding of how time, if we want to think of time as time, cycles. It's this, like the Fibonacci sequence. It's this natural cycle, and it has a timeline. And that you have seed events on those timelines. So like for me as a kid, I remember having terrible bicycle accidents. And I had the one, and then according to like fractal time, there's going to be another seed event where it's ripe to have yet another accident. And I did. And then that time would come around again, and I'd have another accident. Then it became car accidents. I had a really terrible car accident when I was 18. I rolled a car, was thrown from it. It was part of this, like what had been seeded into my reality. And when I had read this, Greg Braden, that's the author. When I read that book, I was like, because his whole point is you can change those seed events. So I wanted to change some seed events. And one day I am meditating. I'm in this deep meditation, and I'm clear. I'm not thinking anything. I'm really just practicing on release, let go, be still, be quiet. And out of the blue, I have this vision of being hit by a red vehicle, like a big truck, big red vehicle. And it snapped me out. And I was like, I don't want that to happen. This is that seed event now. And it must be time for it again. So I watched for a big red truck everywhere I drove. And then one day it happened. I'm driving down the road, and I can see a woman. She's coming out of a neighborhood truck. See, she doesn't see me. I let up off the gas, and I say to her, hey, you see me, right? Like telepathically send it. She all of a sudden does a double take and sees me. And the accident was avoided. And since then, I've not had that issue. It's like now it's the seed event is harmonious in that way. And that is one of the ways that can help us deprogram. But also within our karma, I remember one time I used to have a radio show. I used to talk to always about this subject. This is my subject now. And I would invite guests on. And at one point I had invited a guest. I forget where I was. Anyway, we had run into each other at an event. We were talking. And I said to him, you should come on the show. He was an author about the whole Mayan calendar and the decoding of the Mayan calendar, different things like that. And I said to him, you should come on the show. Let's talk about it. And right then I got really sick. I started to feel sick. We were at some event, and I remember going into the bathroom and I was throwing up, and I left. I went home. And then one day I was like in a store, and I started to feel that sickness again. And I was like, oh my gosh. Ironically, after that first episode, I'd woken up the next morning thinking I was probably had the flu, but I was perfectly fine and was not sick again. So then all of a sudden, like a couple of days later, I'm in the store and I'm starting to feel sick like that again, really sick. I come around a corner and there he is. And I was like, oh, we should definitely get something scheduled. We got it scheduled. I went home, started throwing up again. Then the day of our interview, I wake up and I'm sick, and I feel that sense of being sick. And I was like, okay, this has got to do with him. There is a karma here. I don't know what's going on. And so I sat down, I did my own meditative work. What is our karma? Interestingly, this is when I really started working more on the ET level. So as I'm in this meditation and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, this woman approaches me. She's very tall, thin. She looks otherworldly. I describe her as a Pleiadian. I asked her who she was. She said she was me in the future. And I still am not sure exactly how to pin that down. Was she really me? Was she just what I would be becoming in the future? Was the future now? I couldn't understand it. But regardless, I let her take me on a journey. She said, let's go for a walk. And so we go for a walk. And next thing I know, we're at Mount Shasta. And I'd never been to Mount Shasta, quite honestly. But here I am at the base of Mount Shasta, and we're walking. And I think she's going to take me up, and we're going to walk up the mountain. Instead, she takes me into the mountain. And I see all these caverns, and we're going down these halls, these little hallways, and there's all kinds of different rooms to each side. And we go into this one room, and I see this scene unfolding. And it's this woman and man, and they are alchemists, and they are creating potions. And apparently they have this big book that they are keeping all of their potions in. And they have finalized their work. They're going to be taking it to, I don't know, whomever, whatever royal faction it was that wanted this work. And we're toasting, and he's making us drinks, and we toast. And the next thing I know, I'm throwing up, I'm sick, and I die. He poisoned me and took our work as his own. And I remember when I saw that, I knew I was her, and that this gentleman was him, and that this is what our karma was. And of course, I was like, oh my God, that's just terrible. How could he do that? I was irate. And she said, that's not the end. She took me out of that room into another room, and I go in, and it's this courthouse, this big, huge courthouse. And I see this old man sitting at a table with all these books on the table. And he's a barrister, he's a lawyer, he's sitting there. I realize it's me in another lifetime. I'm this man. And the next thing I know, I see the book that we had written however long ago. It's open on my desk, and I banned the book. And I was like, oh my God, I banned a book? I was appalled at myself. And she said, do you understand what's happening? It's a tit for tat. You do him wrong, he does you wrong. You do him wrong, he does you wrong. That's your karma. And that's when I realized, okay, that has to end. And so what I did was called in the contracts for us, rewrote it with a lot of love in my heart, not holding him accountable, but saying at the same time, this is no longer going to be our karma. I'm done with it. I understand it, and I don't want this anymore. And this is how it's going to work for me. And I gave him his portion back, and I said, you can do with it whatever you want, but this is what I will be doing with it from now on. And I got up out of that meditation, and I was fine. I was perfect again. I was excited about our interview. Next thing I know, I get a call from him. He's sick, and he can't make the show. That's when I really realized how powerful these things can be. And since then, him and I have talked about that in a really great way. And we became really good friends. He was sort of my author buddy. But it's things like that. We can heal our own karma, free ourselves up, become like intuitively sovereign beings, solid in our own selves. And personally, I really think that if we do not become intuitively sovereign, we're always going to be at the will of whatever ET group is in control at any given moment. It's not until we come into our own sovereignty that they no longer have that control over us. So I think it's really about embracing that idea that, there's personal healing that happens, and there's collective healing that happens. But there's also the idea that, as we work with intuition, we are gathering information for our betterment, for our advancement. Like I was saying earlier, information is in the ether. It's just out there. Whoever wants to grab it and do something with it can. This is what people like Einstein and Tesla and Steve Jobs, these kinds of people, they just happen to be in touch with the field to bring us things that are meant to help. We all can do that. We should all really be doing that. And in a sense, making purposeful contact. So I'm going to wrap up here and then we can go into chat and I'll talk about some of these different things. I want to talk to you about how the ETs are showing up for me today. So like I said, I used to think of them as guides. Now I call them ETs. I also see myself as my own guide. What I have always gotten from them is that they do not want me to make them more powerful than I am myself. They don't want that responsibility. My guides have come in the form a lot of times as Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, but also then all the other types. Anymore, they're coming in as Pleiadian, Arcturian. It used to be I would get 2 or 3 guides. Now it's more like 5 and even up to 9 at times. And they're coming in with more and more messages. You know, the Pleiadians, Arcturians, the Greys, the angels, the Andromedans, the Lyrans, even the reptilians. Those entities are now really starting to, I guess, maybe really show themselves to me. Maybe I'm really ready for it now. But they're also giving me messages that aren't just about, you know, my own personal healing or messages for my clients and where they can find their personal healing. They're giving me messages about the global idea of things. And really, it is how we're coming, what I'm getting is how we're coming into being galactic citizens. And I remember one of the first times I saw this, I saw a ship. And this was actually during a meditation. I saw a ship. And I decided to go explore and see what it was. And I go inside this ship and I see maybe 20, 25 different entities in around like, you know, the center of this ship. There was a reflecting pool in the middle of it. And all these entities were around it and they were watching. And I understood that this was an Andromedan ship. And I was like, what is this reflecting pool? It was not making sense to me at first. And then they told me. We regulate the portals. We watch and see what is coming and going. And we regulate what is coming and going. And we're doing that more and more and more as a means of helping more of the good energy come in than the negative low energy. So they're doing a lot of, they're just giving us some help on that end as to what they're allowing in and out. And then, you know, maybe Earth is more of a place that they really guard, that they watch over. It's probably, as I see it, I think the planet is more like Pleiadian than anything. Like it's the Pleiadians that really started here, or maybe it's the Lyrans. I'm just starting to get acquainted with who the Lyrans are. But that the planet was really theirs, and there's a bigger plan going on here. And now you get a lot of different groups. I do think we've been a laboratory and things like that. But it was after that that I started recognizing through, you know, like Stephen Greer's work with CE5 groups and different things like that, that we could actually start really having physical contact, that we might really want to start looking at that. And so I started meditating toward that purpose, meditating on here's where I'm at, you know, come and see me, show up. And it's happening. It's crazy. It still blows me away. It still is mind boggling to me how it works, but it does. It never ceases to amaze me. But late last year, June, July last year, I'm driving down 6th Avenue, which is a major highway in Colorado. And I'm heading eastward, right? It's just lane. And all of a sudden, right in the median between the westbound and eastbound lanes, there is this ball, probably about that big, about the size of a soccer ball. And it's just floating down the median. It's maybe 6 feet up off the ground. And I'm seeing it coming toward me. And I'm thinking, am I seeing that? And of course, I'm thinking, that cannot be a drone. Number one, there's no propulsion. It's just a little ball. And it certainly wouldn't be allowed to be floating down. If it's a drone, it certainly isn't going to be allowed to be floating down. It's Highway 6. And it goes right past me, very controlled also. If you see drones, they're not always that controlled, but this thing was just going down. It followed the highway. I was like, wow, did I just see that? And of course, I go online to start looking at, are there drones like this? Is this, a thing? And I'm realizing, wow, this is not. And I think I just saw a UAP. I wish I hadn't been driving. I wish I'd turned off the highway and went back to follow it. But it was also then that I was doing a lot of this meditation. And so I was meditating more. And one day I'm out on the patio with my husband. We're reorganizing the patio for a party we're having later. And jokingly, I say to him, oh man, this is a better configuration for me to be looking for the ETs. And I turn around and I was like that. And there's a plane going overhead, right? And and then I realized, wait, there's something else next to it up there. And I was like, well, that's a joke, but that's not. And I'm seeing this thing. And at first I thought, are those just mylar balloons? And I look at it, and my husband's looking at it. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but it's not moving. It's not going anywhere. And so I run into the house and get his binoculars, and I get my camera. My husband's a big birder. And so he's spotting it through the binoculars, and I'm taking video of it. And he describes it as, he says it had a red light on it and it's turning like this. And I'm just capturing video of it. And as I'm looking at it, I'm realizing it's like, I get this like, hello. And I was like, oh my God, I think this thing is saying hi to me. And I'm realizing all of a sudden that it is probably because I've been asking it to come in. And so I watched it for 15 minutes. It didn't move. Interestingly, and I have video if we ever want to show it. It's not much, but there are some other anomalies in there. There's a lot going on. So I never saw it until I went back and looked at the video, but there's several of them in there. And at one point, one comes in and it's right underneath the one, comes in and it just is gone. It doesn't go through. Nothing else happens. And that was in September of last year. And I haven't, since then I've had other life things that have happened. My dad had a stroke and things like that. And I haven't really gotten back into my meditation like that, but I'm about ready to do that now again. And I have a feeling it's going to happen a lot. And I'm really looking forward to it. But also in the meantime, as of late last year, November, December, I started seeing 111, 1111 everywhere, every day, everywhere. And that's not a new thing for me. I'm very used to that, except it was persistent. It happened so long. I was shocked. And it's even still happening. And so as I'm really starting to understand what they're saying to us is, now is the time. Ones are new beginnings. It is time for us to start something brand new, to go after this. So I'll stop there. And we can take any questions we want, or I'll let Jim talk with us.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I think we may be just about out of time for the formal session. So I'm going to suggest we close it out and go directly into the after chat. And that will allow everyone a more relaxed opportunity to interact. But I want to thank you. I mean, your journey has been dazzling. And,
it's odd.
You make clairvoyance inspiring. And I really want to thank you for that. And, I want to just underscore that all of us have that capacity. And that's one of the things we're wanting to build into the training program that New Paradigm Institute and Ubiquity University are developing, leading to graduate degrees in extraterrestrial studies. We not only need to know what the facts are, we need to know who we're dealing with and how do we communicate with them. And as you're pointing out, they are completely clairvoyant, and we need to upgrade those faculties within ourselves to also become clairvoyant. And we'll probably succeed both in the ET communication and becoming more empathetic and compassionate with our fellow humans, because once we are better in tune with others, the walls of division tend to break down just naturally in the natural course of things. So I really want to thank you for who you are, and also to remind everyone, Michelle is in our PhD program. And so she's going to be one of the first people to get a PhD degree in extraterrestrial studies. And this is the future, everyone. This is definitely the future. And I have a feeling you're going to end up as one of our faculty.
Oh, I'd love it. I'm so excited. Traditional school never worked for me, and I have
Yeah.
never been so excited about school in all my life than now.
Well, thank you so much. And I think we'll end it there. You'll all be able to join Michelle in the after chat. You will see the link in the chat box, and you receive the link also in your Zoom reminder for today. And then we'll see everyone on Monday. Although next week we have a special program in Technologies of Hope that are going to be, all 5 sessions are going to be convened by Tom Eddington and Don McCann, who's been on our program several times before. They're doing it in a very, very special, contained way. So I won't be opening like I usually do. So I'll see everybody the week after, but I'll be listening attentively with the rest of you to the program. Happy Good Friday, everyone. Think about the crucifixion. Feel solidarity with the Palestinians.